Okay, Josh Smith here again, live from Flat 5 Studio. Today's guest is someone I'm super excited about. It's kind of mind blowing to me, actually, that I have his phone number and I can call him up and we're friends. Sometimes we've played together so much in the last few years, I'll look over and have to pinch myself and realize, wow, that is Reese Wynans right there. I was honored to be involved in the making of his first solo record. This guy is a legend, and to call him a friend is amazing. He hails from the great state of Florida, like I do. He was there at the beginning of the Allman Brothers and the Second Coming. He toured with Boz Scaggs, Captain Beyond, Jerry Jeff Walker, played with Carole King. I mean, come on, Delbert McClinton, all sorts of amazing people. But of course, you know he's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with his bandmates as a member of Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble. Dude, the amount of music I've listened to with you on it in my life has just been enormous, and it's had such an impact on me. And it's a pleasure to talk to you, and I hope to share some of your story with everybody. So please welcome Reese Wynans.
Hey, Josh.
Yeah, man.
Well, I'm glad to know you too, my friend. And you know, I've always been lucky with guitar players. They, other than the ones you mentioned, of course, I've worked with Buddy Guy a lot, Albert Collins back in the day, Otis Rush. Made a record with him, and Dickie Betts. You know, I played some with him, and we've all had the honor of working with Joe Bonamassa. I've been lucky with guitar players. I like working with them. They seem to enjoy having me around for some reason. I don't know why, but I've never been able to play a guitar. It's always seemed kind of a mystery to me, but I like playing the organ and the piano. It seemed way more organized, if you pardon the expression. All the notes in a row rather than layered on top of each other.
Right, right. Yeah. You just have one stream of consciousness instead of six. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Reese, I'm curious. I ask everybody about their beginnings. So, for me, I'm not from a very musical family. It was really a coincidence that a guitar got placed in my hands, and I'm thankful for it. I know you had piano lessons as a kid, but were your parents musical, or was it just something that they did for the kids to keep them busy?
Probably the second thing. They didn't. My mom and dad didn't really like it when we played the radio at home. They didn't like rock and roll music. They didn't. Of course, there was no jazz or blues or even classical music at the house. My mother liked people like Jim Reeves and old-fashioned country crooners like Eddie Arnold. My father played piano. He sort of had a cool stride style of piano, but and they played sort of schmaltzy stuff too. You know, just they didn't read music, just played by ear. And of course, I enjoyed listening to him. But by the time I was about 11 or 12 years old, I started working on this piece by Beethoven. I'd been taking lessons at that point for about 5 or 6 years. I started working on the Moonlight Sonata by Beethoven, and I thought it was the most beautiful piece of music I'd ever heard, and really got me more excited about playing classical piano. And then my brother not too long after that, my brother took me to see Jerry Lee Lewis at the Bradenton Armory, which was the first rock show I'd ever seen. And so that was my opening to rock and roll and to a life of debauchery.
Wow. Wow. And was your brother who took you older than you, I'm assuming?
Yeah. I had two brothers older than me, 7 kids in the family. I was the third.
So you said you weren't listening to rock and roll in the house. How was he even hearing Jerry?
He was the rebel of the family. He listened to the top 40 station all the time, which was considered a taboo in our house. So we would ride around the car and listen to the radio.
So is this?
And it was interesting. Top 40 was interesting back then too, because it's probably the same as for you as a kid. I'm a little bit older than you, but back then they had people like Pat Boone singing the hits of Little Richard. They did, you know, it was still the sort of homogenized versions of those great R&B songs of the day. Uh, it wasn't until much later that we started discovering Little Richard and Sam and Dave and the real versions of those songs. And it was like eye-opening. It's like discovering gold or something to hear what the songs were supposed to sound like, what Fats Domino really sounded like. You know, it was really amazing to us.
Was this in Sarasota?
Clearwater and Sarasota is where I grew up.
Clearwater and Sarasota. Okay. So the teacher that you were going to and working on Moonlight Sonata, was he a 100% classical guy, or would he ever talk about any other kinds of music with you?
Yeah, she was just classical, just classical only, and nobody ever talked about anything else. You know, as far as my lessons go, none of the teachers I ever had talked about as though any other kind of music existed. You know, and so it was really there was classical, there was a jazz, and that was really the two music. There was nobody ever mentioned Broadway or country or rock, of course, or blues or any other kind of genre at all. So very much deprived as even though I'm sort of a musical family. Uh, 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 my grandmother played piano in church. My father, like I said, played schmaltzy ballads and liked to play stride. And my mother learned a little bit of piano, but she really couldn't play much either. None of my six brothers and sisters had much well, they might have had musical talent, but they didn't stay with it.
Right.
So I'm sort of on an island there.
So when you saw Jerry Lee, did it like knock down the doors? Was it like, you know, I mean, I can't imagine what that would be like, having not heard much of that music ever, but being a piano player and then seeing that. I mean, it must have been.
I'll try to describe it. The show was actually on the 4th of July at the Braden Armory, and the place was filled up, and it was kind of smoky, and he was standing up there, had the mic between his legs, and just playing this wild shit on piano. His hair was just flying all over the place. And there was every once in a while firecrackers would go off in the back. And one time he even stopped the band. Just, you cut that shit out back there. You know, it was crazy, man. And I said, what is this? You know, this is like, I've never seen anything like this. And of course they would have local bands play at the Armory, which I would go to see every once in a while. Particularly like the Romans were popular down there. I like them. They played had a big song called Miserlou, which is a guitar favorite. You know, never really learned that one on piano, but Jerry Lee was just wild. And there's actually a great live Jerry Lee Lewis record from those days, and you could hear how he starts the song off at a nice clip, and by the end, every song gets faster and faster. It's just it's bottled insanity. It's just chaos and beautiful, you know. And of course, he was an underrated piano player. He actually could play well, you know.
Oh yeah, yeah. So I can imagine that lighting a spark like in an insane way. So then what happens next? Like, do you search out people to play with to start showing you other things? Is it all picking it out from here? How does the ball get rolling?
I started imitating my father's stride style on piano, you know, just for my own edification, and I couldn't get enough of the rock and roll influence in my playing back then. I really couldn't get that. So I played a little bit of the stride, learned some ragtime, really liked Dixieland music for a while. And in high school, I joined the lab band, the stage band, and we played sort of big band arrangements. And so I enjoyed doing that. Our teacher was Andy Wright, who was a real nice jazz piano player. And so I started listening to more, trying to work in more jazz stuff into my playing. And all the while, I'm starting to listen to more and more radio and recall songs like Johnny B. Good, Sweet Little 16, with all the great piano stuff. At the Hop by the Danny and the Juniors with a great piano intro. And songs like that. And so I started saying there is piano in this music, and the funny thing Josh, was that I knew exactly what they were playing. I could listen to what they were playing on the radio, and I guess from the years of playing classical, I could see it and knew exactly what they were doing. I knew what the chords were. I knew the inversions that they were playing. I could a song like "Slow Down." I knew exactly what it was just from hearing it, which was amazing to me to realize, oh, I could play by ear.
Yeah.
And so I figured out that I could do that. So I joined the lab band and played some of that. And then when I went away to college and in Tallahassee, a friend of mine urged me to try out for this rock band called the Prowlers. And Slow Down was one of the songs that we played. This will be the last time. No, I can't think of this. You Really Got Me, songs like that. Where it was what was the song by the Zombies? She's Not There.
Yeah.
We played all that stuff, and I had purchased a Wurlitzer electric piano and played it all on the Whirly, and those Whirlies sounded great, and it sounded great with the guitar, bass, and drums that were already there.
Yeah. So was that the first gigging, like not till college, pretty much?
Not till college.
Wow. Okay. So
And then we played.
Where was college?
Tallahassee.
Tallahassee. Okay. Florida
Yeah,
State.
I played to Florida State.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
And we played frat parties and dances at the Quad and things like that. Our drummer wore a Beatles wig. There's a picture somewhere. I wish I had it. I'd show you a picture of that band. In fact, I'll try to send it to you.
All right. Man, so I assume this is, you're at college. What was your major, by the way?
I wanted to be a music teacher like Andy Wright. I thought he had it going on. So I went to Florida State. It was a major in music education. And I realized pretty soon that I knew everything about music already. I knew all the music theory. I could play I knew the music history because I've been studying music since I was 5 years old. But what I didn't know was how to play rock and roll music. So I'm learning how to do that, learning how to play soul music. That was really my education. Playing in the Prowlers was way more important than going to class.
Yeah.
And after about the first real education class I took, wasn't until the third year of college, I took one education class and I said, you know what, this is not for me.
Wow. Well, what did your parents think as far as like when you went to college? Were they cool with the educational path? And then when you split, what did they think?
When I left college, my mother practically kicked me out of the house. She was so upset. You're ruining your life. You're throwing your life away. And of course, when I quit college, I had a gig with another band, Joe Bill and the Playboys. And I was about 17, 18 years old by then, and now I'm 73 years old. I've worked ever since, ever steady from then until now. I've never really had any vacation or time off. So it's been overall, playing music has been a good career for me.
Yeah.
So she came around eventually, but took a while.
Yeah. I can especially imagine back then, trying to convince probably relatively conservative parents, what you're going to do, with your life. I was lucky that my parents were always so supportive. My grandparents were not the same. They thought it was a huge disaster that I did not go to college, but it worked out.
You didn't go at all?
No, and I didn't go at all. No.
Well, it's not for everybody. And some people, for a lot of people, it's a total waste of money.
Yeah. Yeah, I felt like I knew what I was going to do already. And unless I was going to be an educator, it just felt like I was better served to I was already gigging. It felt like, well, I should start gigging full time and just get into it now, as opposed to just playing on the weekends or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the playing the frat parties was wild. I never, it was just drunken. Uh, uh, I don't want to say orgies, but just Animal House kind of activities going on at
Yeah.
Florida State. And the coolest thing was that right across the street from Florida State University is Florida A&M University. And my friend had an inn over there at this club on the campus where they had a soul band. And so I would take my whirly over there and sit in with the soul band. And so that was really my first uh, glimpse of R&B, when that was new to all of us back then.
Yeah. Wow.
And so it really wasn't a nice education.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So then, obviously you go from band to band, local band, playing gigs, starting to make some money. You realized obviously this was your calling and this is what you're going to do. You're a pretty serious guy. I would assume you treated it that way even back then, like you knew you had to make a living and be responsible. It wasn't just a party. So how did you approach, finding that the way to be stable?
Well, I had a great gig right leaving college. Joe Bill and the Playboys worked all the time. They had a regular circuit up through Tampa, Sarasota, Bradenton, Tampa, St. Pete, a whole circuit of clubs that we'd play. And usually back then the gigs were not one nighters, but a week at a time.
Right.
And so we would. I worked with Joe Bill for a long time. I worked with there was a couple other guys that I worked with. One band had a house gig at the bowling alley, Sarasota Lanes. So I played with them for a couple of months. Later on, a friend of mine's dad had a club, so we played out there with the Bittersweet, and that was Larry Reinhardt and Ramon, and Ramon's girlfriend Tanya was the fire dancer, so we would back her up.
Wow.
Dinner and show.
Yeah. Dinner.
And so Sarasota back then, I mean, there was in Bradenton, there was a lot of clubs that had live music. It was really kind of the thing to do, is go out and hear a band back in those days. That's where I first saw the Club Mary. That's where the first place I saw Dickie Betts, who was from Sarasota, and he had a band called the Soul Children. Huh?
I think he still lives in Sarasota, no?
Still does.
Yeah. I remember even going to Sarasota to play gigs myself as a kid, and he showed up once or twice, and I always knew he was in Sarasota, Yeah.
He was phenomenal even as a young kid. He was just well known as the best local guitar player around, and we all knew something good was going to happen for Dickie, except he was a little wild, he was wilder than the rest of us.
Wow. That's held true, I think. So I'm curious about, I mean, obviously that's a great story, so we should tell it, but when you start playing with those guys, the Second Coming guys, is it really Dickie's band pretty much?
Yes. Yeah, the Dickie and Barry Oakley, who had come to Sarasota with the Romans, and then we hired him. He wanted to stay in Sarasota, so we hired him in our band out at the Club Mary. And when Dickie and Rhino, Larry Reinhardt, and Barry put this band, they had this offer from um, um, a guy in Jacksonville to put a band together, make a record. They all relocated to Jacksonville. I stayed in Sarasota. You know, um, portent of things to come. You know, they went on to form a band without me. As it worked out, Dickie's wife, Dale, was playing organ with the band. And she became pregnant with her first child. And when the due date came along, Dickie had to keep playing, even though Dale was, gone in the hospital. So they asked me to come up and fill in for a while. Mm-hmm. And so I filled in for a while with the organ that I had bought and my old Whirly, and of course things went pretty well. And when Dale got ready to play again, she became the lead singer and conga player, and I stayed on as the organ player. Wow! And so that was the second coming, and Dickie and Dale sang great together. They did. He did songs like "I Got a Mind to Give Up Living," "Born in Chicago." Dale would sing Jefferson Airplane songs, and Rhino would do all the Hendrix stuff. So it was a cover band, but we stretched all the songs out, which was unusual for back then. Right. We were one of the first bands to do that.
That you brought up the organ there, and I was going to ask, when's the actual first time you sat down and played an organ?
The first time I remember playing an organ was with Joe Bill and the Playboys. I went and bought it. I knew I wanted it. I'd never really played one. I purchased a Hammond M1, which had the split level. I think it was an M1. Hammond M1, the split level keys, and I bought a Leslie for $1,000, and started carrying it around. Put it up there to the gig, and just would play chords on it, and it was just kind of figuring out how to play. Listening to organ players at the time, my favorite guy was Ray Manzarek of the Doors, who actually played in Farfisa, so I tried to play the Hammond like a Farfisa, and then a lot of the other bands had, Booker T had Green Onion, and then the guy I discovered, Felix from the Young Rascals, which I can't, Felix Pappalardi, I think was his last name. Yeah. And of course, I love the sound of his B3, and so I started trying to play like Felix. So I was very much playing like other guys, and that's how you develop your own thing, is you eventually amalgamate all those styles together and to become you.
Yeah. I mean, keyboard is an interesting, kind of like guitar. Like you can come up and play piano your whole life and never play organ and learn how to physically handle that instrument, kind of in the way that, I couldn't play a certain style of guitar or 7-string guitar. I remember a story about Duke Jethro with B.B. King, always played organ, and on Live at the Regal, he plays piano. And I read an interview where he said they got there and something was wrong with the organ and they couldn't get anything, and all they had was a piano, and he'd never played piano on BB's gig. And of course, that becomes Live at the Regal, the most famous live album of all time.
What a story, man! That's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, but when you started to find your way on organ, did you notice that, not that you got called for more gigs or whatever, but that you started to have like a new voice, maybe?
Yeah, I had a new voice, but I really wasn't very good on it. And I'll never forget this guy who was playing with Dickie Betts. I think his name was Rod. Somebody asked me if he could come up and sit in on my B3, on my Hammond M1, and so I said, sure, yeah, come on up and play. And he was amazing, and he just wiped the floor with me. Just had so many great licks he could play, and I hadn't really ever heard anybody play great Hammond in person like that. So he was the first guy who was really good. So it really inspired me to become a lot better at it, which I did.
Wow. Well, yeah, of course you did. So, okay, so you're playing with
Well, it
Second
didn't
Coming.
intimidate me, is what I'm saying. You know, some guys will get intimidated if somebody else is much better than them.
But you
To me,
got motivated.
it just lit a fire under me. Yeah.
Yeah. That's I mean, for me as a kid, those moments were what I lived for. Like, because not only was I hoping to get, not beat up, but hoping to get like, some sort of constructive criticism all the time because I was playing with older cats. I was also just hoping for that nod of approval. So I would work so hard so that the next week I had improved what I had done previous. To me, that was the drug,
Well, that's a totally valid statement. And I'll never forget the first guy who came up and said, "You're a motherfucker." I'll never, because I never thought I was. I thought I was just okay. So, you're a monster. So how did that happen to you? I said, "Oh, I don't know, man. Because I've just been working on it, and thanks a lot."
Yeah.
And it's so I don't know what the word is, but fulfilling to realize that some people think you've actually, improved that much. And so those are important moments for all of us when that happens.
Yeah. All right. So then you're playing in Second Coming with Dickie and his wife and everything. When's Dwayne come back to town? I know he's out in L.A., right? And he comes back to town.
No, he's in Muscle Shoals.
Oh, he's
Greg is in L.A.
Okay.
Greg's in L.A. Dwayne going back and forth from Muscle Shoals to Daytona Beach where he lived. Right. And I think J-Mo was up in Muscle Shoals with him as well. Okay. I'm not really sure the story about J-Mo, but there is a story about Dwayne who would come through, somehow had heard about Dickie or he'd heard about the Second Coming. We were playing this psychedelic nightclub in Jacksonville and had sort of a reputation as the first psychedelic band in Florida. That we would take songs and stretch them out and play. Anyway, he came by the club, sat in with us, and it was the most beautiful thing we'd ever heard. None of us knew who Dwayne was, even though he'd spent a lot of his time in Florida as well. I'd never heard of the Almond Joys. I'd never heard of the Hourglass. But hearing him, he was immediately our best friend because none of us had ever heard anything like Dwayne's slide guitar styles. And he was one of those guys who could fit in with every song we played. It didn't matter what song we were playing. He had something to play that was perfect in that song. And it's easy to see why he was such a great studio guy. Excuse me a second. Getting on his throat. So he would come by more and more often, on the weekends. He would come by, he would stop in a Thursday and Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday. We would go play free sessions at the park, and the other local bands in town would come and join us. It was a big time, and he was loving it. One of the guys who would come out and play with us on Sunday was Butch Trucks, who was working downtown in Jacksonville. And finally, Dwayne said, "My brother and I are putting a band together. I want you guys to be in the band. Dickie, Barry, Butch, J-Mo, and then he had a conversation with me.
Yeah.
And you can guess what that is. Well, I've got 2 drummers, I've got 2 guitar players. I could either have 2 keyboards or I could have 2 guitars.
Yeah.
And I think I'm going with the 2 guitars. So you're out. So I was out.
Man.
So, and you know, it hurt my feelings a little bit, but for me, I felt like I was lucky to be in the Second Coming. And when Dwayne broke that band up, you know, I had a feeling something else was right around the corner. And it turned out Dwayne had been recording with this guy, Muscle Shoals Boz Skaggs, and who was putting a band together and going back to San Francisco, and I wanted to play out there. So Dwayne recommended me for that gig. So I relocated to San Francisco not too long after the Allman Brothers got started.
Really?
And then they moved to Macon. And I don't know, have you read any of the books about the early Allman Brothers in Macon?
Bit, yeah, a little bit.
It was rough for those guys.
I would assume so. Yeah, it seemed like it. Yeah.
Two hotel rooms, no money, begging for food, you know, just scraping by. Yeah. It was rugged. I don't know if I could have done. I don't know if I could have done it. I was out there at least making a salary with Boz, you know, yeah. And then continuing my education, going to see all the great San Francisco bands of the day, and they're talking about the late '60s. So it was bands like the Grateful Dead and Quicksilver Messenger Service, Janis Joplin, It's a Beautiful Day, Dan Hicks and the Hot Licks was out there then. Just a couple of them that I could think of.
Jefferson Airplane, probably, I would assume.
Jefferson Airplane was there. And I got to see a bunch of them, so that was quite an education.
Was the Boz gig? I mean, obviously, it was a good gig for stability and the paycheck, and it's good music. Was it any different going from, you know, the bands you toured with and played in clubs in Florida to like a gig like that? Did you feel like you'd arrived a little bit?
I felt something like that, like I was doing something important. But I'll tell you something else, Josh. They weren't Southern.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it was a different thing, and I really noticed how different the music is, regionally in the country, and so that was eye-opening for me. And you know who our drummer was with Boz? With George Rain.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know who.
That's the first time you met him?
That's the first time I met George.
Wow.
And of course he's a great drummer, and Boz was a great guy, a great guitar player, and I really liked our band. There's some rare recordings of us playing live somewhere, playing a song too fast, and then we played the Fillmore a couple times, and all the local San Francisco club. And I enjoyed it. I was having a great time out there. I'd gotten married in the meantime, and my wife didn't really like San Francisco too much, so she up and left. You know, she packed it. She said, "I'm leaving." So I stayed out there for a while by myself, and that's kind of a recipe for trouble, you know. And I missed her, so I told Boz I had to go. I quit the band and tried to save my marriage, and found myself in a show band with some of my old Sarasota guys, going up and down the coast of the country playing. You know what a show band did back then? It's 5 sets a night, 4 dance sets in one show, 2 shows on the weekend. And then we would play places for 3 to 6 weeks at a time. So that's what that was like. And I learned how our bass player was one of the lead singers. So that's when I really got on the left-handed piano bass and playing the horn chart, the horn stabs with my right hand, and learned how to play the show band thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've probably never been in a show band.
Not like that. I mean, I've done some, more casual type stuff, top 40 gigs, when I, first, especially when I first moved to LA, but never like that, like back in the day, show band type thing. Which, I mean, people wonder why guys get so good and so versatile. Well, that's why, because you were playing so many sets and so many hours of music. I mean, you can't help but become so, solid, for lack of a better term.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. At that point, I was on fire. I could play anything,
Yeah.
and um, and I like the playing the Chicago songs and the Blood, Sweat, and Tears songs
Sure.
and all that stuff. It was big fun for me. Our
Yeah.
band was called Pandemonium, and we made a lot of money, uh, which my wife was happy about that, and
Yeah.
we could live in have a reasonable style of living, and so that was my life for 2 or 3 years. Um, I ended up uh, back down in Bradenton Beach at a house gig at a club called the Silver Dollar, the Silver Dollar Bar, and I did a house gig there for about 2 years, and that takes us up to 1975.
Wow. All right. So you're up to. Meanwhile, with Boz, did you ever leave the country with Boz, or was it all in the States?
No, all the states. We went to Hawaii once, but basically in the states.
When's the first time you left the
Basically in
country?
San Francisco. We
Really?
never really, we didn't really go on tour.
Wow.
He was just playing the local clubs, kind of getting his own thing together. He had just left the Steve Miller Band and
Mhm.
was kind of getting his own thing together.
When's the
And we were
first time you
playing
left
all
the
the
States?
first time I left the States. Well, let me think. Jerry Jeff Walker just played in America. Delbert did a lot of shows in Canada. So
Mhm.
when I was working with him in the '80s, uh, of course we did all the Canadian shows. When I joined Stevie in '85, our first show was in Dallas. The second show was I think it was Milwaukee Fest or Chicago Fest. Third show was Montreux. So that's really the first time. Oh, well, wait a minute. I had actually gone to Europe. I had been to Europe with Carole King
Ah.
in the early '80s.
All right. Yeah.
I'd made 3 records with her in
Yeah.
Austin, and one of them's called "Touch the Sky,"
Hmm.
and another one was called "Pearls," which was a remake of songs that other of hers that other people had recorded,
Right.
and the third one was called "One to One." And then we did a little sort of a quick tour of Europe, probably 3 weeks. Played Paris, London, Stockholm, um, places like that. Uh, mostly nice theaters and things like that. She was very well received.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I can imagine. Wow. All right. So that was your first European travel then.
Yeah.
Wow. Amazing. All right. So let's jump back 75. I'm assuming that's what Captain Beyond coming up, or Jerry Jeff.
No, I actually skipped over Captain Beyond. It was
Okay.
a short-lived episode, probably about '73, where I had left uh, the show band and ran into Rhino in Atlanta, and he was going out to uh, San Francisco to record. Did I want to come out there with him?
Hmm.
And I said, sure, I do. And so, not realizing how messed up Captain Beyond's situation was at that time. Their first record, I just loved it, and so I thought it was going to be more of that.
Mm.
But it was different than that, and so we went to the what was the name of the studio? This I'll think of it. The place in Sausalito.
Hiders?
Yes,
yeah.
And we made Sufficiently Breathless, which we all called "Eat Some Fish for Breakfast." And our lead singer was Rod Evans, who was with Deep Purple. Bass player, of course, was Lee Dorman from the Iron Butterfly, and Rhino, my friend from Sarasota, was the guitar player, and we had a drummer from Miami named Manny, and a percussionist named Gia. I think he was also from Miami. And so we spent probably 6 weeks in that, basically living in the studio making that record. What a chore it was, and it was kind of like trying to find the time when people were high but not too high, and when you could just get that right, the track going at the right time. Because if you waited too long, then it was diminishing returns, and it was a pretty bad situation. I thought the record came out about as good as it could have, considering all that. And I actually went, after the record was done, I went down to LA with them for about a month and a half. They talking about they were going to do some press and do some gigs. We did one gig, and I had to go. I mean, I just I needed more. I loved LA, but we didn't have any money. I wasn't really doing LA the way I wanted to do LA.
Sure.
So I went back to Florida and eventually joined. I moved to my marriage had split up. I divorced my first wife and moved to Austin, and that's when I joined the Jerry Jeff 75.
Did you have the gig already when you moved to Austin? Were you moving to Austin just to move to Austin, like leap of faith?
No, I had the gig already. A friend of mine, another great guitar player, lives here in Nashville now. I don't know if you know him or not. His name is Dave Perkins. If you should Google Dave Perkins, and you'll hear some nice guitar playing. Dave was playing with Vassar Clements, who was opening for Jerry Jeff Walker and the Los Gonzo band, and Dave would come out and sit in on their encore. Well, Jerry Jeff had a falling out with the Los Gonzo band. I think it's over money. I think there was a punch to the nose by the piano player to Jerry Jeff, and eventually and a quick firing of the Los Gonzo band. And Jerry Jeff turned to Dave to put a band together for him. Dave is a friend of mine. I'd done some recording of his original songs in Florida, and so Dave called me. Do I want to come and be in the Jerry Jeff Walker band? And I said, well, let me check it out. So I went out to Austin, and of course Austin was wild back then. The country music scene, Willie Nelson was just getting super popular. Jerry Jeff Walker was a big star in Texas, and little did I know, a big star all over the country. We headlined shows all over America. I didn't even know he was a headliner, but the idea of moving to Austin and playing this music appeals to me. I'd never really played country music, and it was sort of country folk music. That's what it was, and it was fun. Yeah. We had a good band, great bunch of guys. Our old bass player for that band recently sent me a great retrospective of videos that he'd taken with an old camera from back in those days. And of course, we all miss Jerry Jeff. He just passed not too long ago, and and it hit me a little harder than I thought it would. He was quite a character, and we had a wild time playing together.
I bet, and a lot of good music, man. So that move to Austin ended up being incredibly fertile for you. You ended up gig. I mean, uh, obviously, you never know how things are going to work out. But it was, like you said, I mean, I wasn't there, but I know the scene seems, when I read about it, just to be huge there at that moment. So much music, so many new bands coming to town and starting things and starting to have success. Uh, did it feel that way, like when you moved there? Like there was just so much going on?
Yes, yes. This was totally unlike Florida, which
Yeah.
was all about. Um, Florida club bands were all about cover bands.
Mm,
You know, out in Austin, it was all original music,
yeah.
and I thought, oh, this is great. And so being with Jerry Jeff Walker, that was a prestigious gig. You know, I was doing sessions with all of the other uh, country artists out there,
Yeah.
and everybody, and that's where we ran into Carole King, who wanted to record with the Jerry Jeff Walker band.
Yeah.
Uh, but there was this other thing that was going on out there that was kind of new to me, and that's the blues thing.
Right.
And so I started hanging out over at Antone's, and the blues guys out there didn't really hang out with the country guys much. It was sort of two different things,
Mm,
and I found myself really liking what the blues guys were doing, and the country guys were all great. I mean, I loved Ray Wiley Hubbard. I loved
oh, yeah.
uh, uh, Steve Fromholtz and uh, and all of the other Jimmy Dale Gilmore and shoot, I can't even think of the other guys. Joe Ely.
Yeah.
I mean, there was so much talent there. And of course, this is not even talking about Willie Nelson in his studio, who I would go out and do records at his place all the time,
Right.
and got to know him some and all his band, and they were great.
Yeah.
So yeah, once again, I was in the around not once again. I mean, I guess San Francisco was the center of music. Uh, Jacksonville was the center of music. Austin, Texas was the center of music, the center of
Yeah.
live music, and I couldn't get enough of it. I said, so this is the best thing I've ever done is go to Austin.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, and you got to play, like you said, so you start hearing the blues guys, and obviously they took blues really serious. You know, there was a groundswell of, like, you know, traditional rebirth of blues and respect, and all the original guys were going into town to play at Antone's. Clifford was bringing all the real guys there. So, I mean, I can't imagine being in those two worlds and that scene. Plus, everybody seemed to just be so not studious, but so serious about being great and loving music. You know, that's inspiring.
Well, and you know who was the main drummer at Antone's house band was George Raines.
George Raines, yeah, yeah.
And so George couldn't believe it when I started hanging out there at Antone's. He said, "What are you doing here?" He didn't even know I was in town. So I started, you know, renewed acquaintances with George, and he was pissed off at me for quitting Boz's band, but he got over it.
Yeah.
You know, he introduced me to Derek O'Brien and Denny Freeman
Yeah.
and Mel Brown, who was the organist in the Anton's house band.
Yeah.
And so I would go to the Anton's every night and watch the band. And late at night, you know, about the last set, the last couple songs, Mel would finally get tired, or he would either go strap on the guitar and play a couple songs, or he would just get tired and take a break. That was my chance to go jump up on the organ and play with the Anton's house band, which I
Mm,
love doing that.
yeah.
So that it just got to be a big fun, and that's how things worked out. You know,
Yeah.
the T-Birds had a house gig across town at the Rome Inn. I would go see them on Monday. Uh, there was all kinds of studios there doing country sessions, doing blues sessions. Jerry Jeff Walker was going on the road. I was, I was doing everything. It was the perfect time for me. It was just a great time.
Yeah. Where do you meet Delbert the first time?
Well, Delbert opened shows for us, for Jerry Jeff Walker, and I started listening to his band, and he was really good. And I don't know, a young Delbert, could sing. I mean, old Delbert could sing too, but young Delbert was a force to be reckoned with. He was probably one of the best honky tonk singers in history. He was really phenomenal, especially in a club. He was just, and it's just, I loved. It was like Jimmy Hall, working the room. He was that guy, and so I loved it. And I finally decided, Jerry Jeff, Dave had quit the band. If you're moving on to about 1980, Dave Perkins had quit the band. The band was still good, but I was getting drawn towards the blues.
Yeah.
I knew it was just happening. I knew it was happening. Nobody's fault. And so I talked to Delbert. They were looking for a piano player. Their guy had just left. So I quit Jerry Jeff and joined Delbert.
Wow. It's amazing how things just line up, and you go from gig to gig, and you're also just growing as a musician with every gig. Like you said, now you're getting into blues, and Delbert couldn't have been a more perfect gig to straddle the line between all those kinds of music,
It was almost too easy, Josh. It was just laid at my feet. Here, do you want to do this? Yeah.
Oh man.
No, but of course the thing is, Josh, we could say how easy it is, but a door can open for you, but you have to walk through the door, and you have to bring something through the door with you, your talent with you, that is something that appeals to somebody else. You have to have worked and hard enough to where you have something to offer to people. So, for me, I would, to get offered a gig working with Delbert, I don't sing, I play piano, I play organ, but I play it with a fire, and everybody doesn't do that. In those days, today, Delbert's band is a big band. He has a horn section, a complete rhythm section. Back in those days, it was a 5-piece band, and so we just tore it up. We from Tipitina's to Kane's Ballroom, the Cotillion Ballroom, all the dance halls across the country. It was just amazing. It was just an incredible time, and I'd never done that before. I'd never toured with a blues band, and I was having the time of my life.
Yeah. There's nothing like that, just a tight band playing clubs on the road over and over all across America. It's kind of the best thing in the world.
Our guitar player was Billy Sanders, who's a guy who wore a great big cowboy hat and was just the greatest guy. And we had a rhythm guitar player was James Pennebecker, which you may know James.
Yeah.
So it was a really good band.
Well, I mean, obviously, you play with that, so that kind of brings us to Stevie, right? Stevie happens right after Delbert.
Right. I toured with Delbert for 5 years.
Yeah.
I had gotten married again right at the beginning of the Delbert days, and by the end of my time with Delbert, it was falling apart. I didn't think I could stay on the road and stay married. It just wasn't going to work. So I gave Delbert my notice to go home and try to work things out. see if our marriage could be saved.
Mm-hmm.
But the way things work out,
Yeah.
So the last night, the last show uh, of the last tour with Delbert, um, our sax player Joe Sublette, who's a great sax player, lives in LA now. Says he's doing a gig with across town after the last gig. They were looking for a piano player. Did I want to go do it? And I said, well, I don't know. It's kind of late, Joe. And I was going to drive to Austin tonight. I said, well, it's with Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble. We're going to go over and just do one song, and then you can still make the drive. And I had met, I had seen Chris Layton. I think I'd said hello to him at one time. I'd never met Tommy. I had never met Stevie.
Really, you'd never met Stevie, so you'd seen like the T-Birds and stuff around town, but you'd never actually met Stevie yet until then.
Never talked. I met Jimmy, but I hadn't really talked to him very much. I'd seen Stevie sit in, but I never really talked to him. Because I didn't know him. Nobody introduced me to him.
Yeah.
So I didn't go up to him. But I went to hear the Double Trouble as the trio at the Continental Club one time. Couldn't get in. It was so crowded I couldn't get in. I went to see the Triple Threat Review out at Sub Creek and thought that was pretty slam, and that was pretty rocking. But I couldn't stay. I had to get out of there and go do something. So once again I didn't get to meet him. So but they knew who I was. I got to the studio. They knew me, and I knew who they were. We had one song to do, was to Look at Little Sister, the Hank Ballard shuffle that he had recorded before, but he wanted to do it this time with piano and saxophone. So we got over to the studio. He had his whole rig set up like a live performance in the studio, the PA and everything. We walked in there. We started. It was so loud. I had the piano in a separate room, closed off from the rest of the studio. I could not hear the piano while I was playing the song. Joe couldn't hear himself while he was playing. So we played along, and then they got the track, and then we went back in and overdubbed our stuff to it. And it sounded great. And Stevie was happy with it. And Joe took off, but Stevie asked me, did I want to play another song? And if I'm not mistaken, the second song we played was called Soul to Soul, was the title of the record. And so he wanted to get a kind of rainy day feel, like a Hendrixy feel on it, on the shuffle. So, yeah, man, yeah, I'd love to do it. And I don't know if they had heard me play B3 before, but the B3 with Stevie, Tommy, and Chris just really seemed to add something. It really, more than the piano, it was just this bread and butter that was there, and it kind of set the table a little bit. They really liked the way that turned out. It gave me a solo on there, which was in B, not my favorite key, but you do what you can do. And they asked me, did I want to do another song? And so we did You Can't Change It, which I love that song. And the B3 really helped that song. It needed the pad there. And so by that time, it was about 6 o'clock in the morning. Too late to drive back to Austin. And so they asked me, did I want to stay over and come back in the next day and do this again? I went back the next day. We got 3 more songs. So in 2 days, we had 6 master keeper tracks.
Wow.
So that night they asked me, did I want to join the band?
Just like that, 2 days.
Just like that. Yeah.
Unreal. Yeah,
they were looking to do something different with the band to augment the trio. Their manager, they originally asked Derek O'Brien if he wanted to come and be a support guitar player,
Mm.
which would have worked out great, but their manager didn't want another guitar player on the stage with Stevie, so they wanted a keyboard. So once again, in the right place at the right time.
Unreal. Unreal. So how much longer was the recording of that record? How many more days?
We did those 2 nights. We got the 6 songs, and my recollection is, damn here, Josh, I want to say it couldn't have been more than a week. You know, been 4 or 5 more days. I don't really remember the rest of the recording. It went by in a haze.
Did you overdub on anything they'd already done before you got there?
No,
No.
no. Everything else, in my recollection, everything else were live takes.
Yeah. Wow.
And yeah, they asked me to join the band. I had to make the decision right away.
And you were just deciding to come off the road to save your marriage.
Right. Right. So what a dilemma. So I went home after the tracking and just had to have some difficult conversations.
Yeah.
And decided that it's just, this is the best thing that's ever been offered to me. I can't say no. And what do you think, honey? You think this will work out? He said, oh yeah, go ahead, go back on the road. It'll be great.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't so great, but we ended up divorcing.
Yeah.
But my time with Stevie was time I'll always treasure.
I'm assuming it was like a blur. I mean, because you know it goes by so fast, but you're doing so much, so many gigs, so many amazing things, records, all that stuff. But then next thing you know, it's over. I'm curious. I mean, not to get too deep or anything like that. Did you have an inkling? I don't know. You know, you don't strike me as a very party guy, but did you have an inkling, obviously, when you stepped into the studio, of what kind of situation you were stepping into?
Well, I was concerned with drug use. I'd been around other people that were heavily into drugs before this. Not to mention any names, but I was well aware of how things can get out of hand. Myself, I was always sort of a casual drug user. If my little bit of cocaine ran out, that was fine. You know, I'm not gonna get somebody to FedEx me an 8-ball so I could stay up for 4 more days. I'm not gonna do that. You know, I'll go to bed and come back tomorrow and we'll see what happens tomorrow. You know, I was different than in that regard. I was different than some of the other guys in Double Trouble who wanted to keep the party going, and had started to be, after a year or so into the band, I started to become more concerned that this could spiral and really not be good. And I was glad when Stevie decided to go to rehab and sober up.
Yeah.
I was happy about that. I mean, I was sorry to see him go down that hole, you know, go down that spiral where you have to hit bottom, and then, you know, that's never pleasant.
Yeah.
But he came out of that terrifically and was a much happier guy.
Well, that's amazing to me. From, you know, obviously he's one of my biggest heroes, and I had my period of obsession, you know, where I was watching every bootleg I could and reading every interview and everything. And what always struck me after '87, you know, when he was clean, was just, yeah, how happy he seemed in every interview and everything. And it obviously makes it even more depressing what happened. But, you know, yeah, it seemed like you guys were just living. I remember seeing an interview where it was just Chris and Stevie being interviewed on TV somewhere. I had it on a bootleg, and they asked Chris and Stevie, what would be the best thing that could happen for your band right now in career? And they both just smiled and were like, just keep going. This is awesome, you know? And it seemed like that he knew how great it was after he cleaned up.
Well, the thing that happened after when he cleaned up is the anger disappeared, along with the party disappeared. And I have to tell you, I was concerned, about the anger being gone, and it's, I mean, that's a good thing, right? But I hope you're not taking all your anger, your fire out of your playing. And we went in to cut in step, and we had to play the songs over and over and over again to get takes. And we'd play along, he'd stop it, and we'd start again, play again. And he wasn't messing up or anything like that, but he just was, he wasn't angry, but he was driven to make it the best thing he's ever done. And so the being driven took over the spot where there was some anger before, I thought. So we the shows were just unbelievable, even before he sobered up, after he sobered up. Every song, it seems like it would just hit one high point after another. It was just the most amazing thing to be on stage during that, and you felt like nothing you could do could go wrong. This was all exactly the way it should be. And I mean, I felt at the time like we were leading the pack as far as the blues rock people of the day. We could play jazz festivals, pop festivals, blues festivals, TV shows, all kinds of bands wanted us to open shows for them, and I mean, we were just in demand as the thing. And it felt like the best thing ever, And then this would continue. We would make records for decades after this, and it would just evolve and mature, and it's just like I said, the time of my life. So I was so lucky to have been in that situation, and I'll never forget it.
In the midst of it, when it's going on, is the feeling like as special as while it's going on as it is? I mean, because now it's like, Stevie and you guys are, it's become a legendary thing. At the time, it's like you're having success and it's amazing. But did it feel more like, like you've been in other bands, maybe not on that same high peak, but other big bands, did it just feel like that? Or did you know it was special then?
No, we knew there was something unique going on with this.
Yeah.
And the four of us just felt had the brotherhood thing going, where we talked about the music. We really were all driven to make the music right, and we would listen to board mixes of the show after the show on the bus and critique it, and what can we do to make it better? This part, and so after that we would watch videos of Hubert Sumlin or Muddy Waters or Freddie King, or and so we were completely ate up with the music. We couldn't get enough of it. We were just driven to make ourselves the best we could be, and to not only look ahead, but to look back and remember the roots, where all this blues had come from. Where are we gonna take it? And so it felt special.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. Wow. I mean,
I didn't feel like that with Delbert. I didn't feel like that with Jerry Jeff Walker, or Boz Skaggs. Those they were just sort of convenient bands that I was having a blast with, but this was like the culmination of for me of my life at that
Yeah. Well, I mean, so when unfortunately Stevie passes away, did, obviously there's probably a period of just, besides the shock of, like you said, you've already in your mind planned out the next decades of your life in this band, and all the special things you guys are going to do. Personally, for you, just as like a musician with responsibilities and as a grown adult, when did it start to hit you like, you need to start thinking about what's next for you? It had to be incredibly surreal. I can't relate to that at all.
Well, the fact the strangeness of it is, uh, after Stevie got killed, we all went home, and Austin was just bizarre to me. I would go around to Antone's and to the other clubs, and I felt like I didn't need to be there. I shouldn't be there, And at the same time, my second marriage was breaking up, and so I'm really feeling incredibly alone, and don't know what I'm going to do. Joe Ely came along and offered me a tour. Did I want a tour with him for about a year with this other great guitar player, Ian Moore, and that was a good band. Uh, um, but with Joe Ely, we had come to Nashville to record the Love and Danger with Tony Brown, and Tony really liked me. He was trying to talk me into moving to Nashville, and said, you come up here, Reese, you'll be making six figures. You'll be doing sessions all the time. It'll be great." And this was like 92, which was really, or 91, which was really a heyday of country. Things were going great in Nashville at that time. And so I toured with Joe. A friend of mine, when that was over, a friend of mine offered me a gig in Nashville with Hal Ketchum. My divorce was final. I didn't really want to be in Austin anymore. It felt weird. It just felt weird. My ex-wife lived down the street from me with her new boyfriend. Uh, uh, just felt weird. So I thought I'd try the gig out with Hal. Come back to playing country music again. Moved to Nashville. After 2 weeks in Nashville, coming home from a gig one night, I got mugged at the Shoney's Big Boy Shoney's Motor Inn downtown. So welcome to Nashville.
Wow.
About a month after that, Hal fired me.
Oh man.
So
for what reason?
There was no reason. The day before he fired me, he was telling us all how much he loved the band, and that he wanted to do a double record, a double live record. Then the next day, the manager calls and says, "Sorry, Reese, but you have to. We're paid you. It was Monday. We'll pay your hotel room until Friday, and then you're on your own."
Oh man. Jeez.
So what I did is I contacted an old friend of mine, Leroy Parnell, who I knew from Austin, and he had a good band together, and they were touring. And I told him what had happened and what was going on, and he said, "Let me see what I can do." And I had some other people that I knew here in town. I knew Mike Henderson, who played a local gig out at the Bluebird, and I went to see him. Asked him if he knew anybody, and I knew things would come along. I wasn't hearing anything from as far as sessions coming my way, you know, so it had to be a touring gig. Eventually, Leroy called, said he fired his piano player, and could I come and do it? And so he kind of really helped me out of that when I was in a bind.
Wow.
And toured with him for a couple of years, and we made a bunch of good records with Leroy. He had let's see, at least 2 number ones, maybe 3 number ones, and never really got over to being a headliner act, but had a lot of fans, and James Pennebecker was our guitar player, and so it was nice to work with James again.
Yeah.
Steve Mackey played bass, Lynn Williams played drums, really a great bunch of guys, and I really enjoyed working with them. After about 2 years of that, I basically retired from the road. I started getting sessions, you know, and this was about 95 or 96. Started working a lot with Brooks and Dunn. I made 4 or 5 records with them, and then I became sort of an in-demand guy in Nashville, and stayed busy for probably a decade after that. You know, up until about 2011, I was getting plenty of studio work, and so I just decided to stay here in town and enjoy my kids growing up and living in Nashville.
Yeah. I mean, what did you think when the pivot was, you know, all of a sudden you were like a full-time session guy? Was it, you know, did it feel different to you? Did you enjoy it? Obviously, you probably grew to enjoy it, but at first, was it weird?
Well, you know, I had some experience playing country music, but the country music that I played with Jerry Jeff Walker was a lot different than the country music they were playing up here in Nashville.
Yeah, much
And
different than Boot Scoot and Boogie. Way different.
way different,
Yeah.
Josh. And, you know, and I don't want to say there's anything wrong with the country music here in Nashville. You know, they do seem to be hung up on this play it perfect thing, you know, and rather than let's get a feel going or play anything unique. But you learn the ins and outs of that, and you learn how to play perfect, which was easy for me. I could do that. I just had to pull off on my creativity somewhat, you know, and then play it, start safe, and then come up with something cool around that, you know, which, you know, use your taste. So, you know, instead of filling up everything with chops, you know, just use your taste. And so it's part of, once again, part of my education. So I learned a lot being a studio musician.
Yeah.
And there's some fantastic musicians here in Nashville.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Yeah. Man, it's kind of, I mean, when you look at the breadth of your story, it's pretty unbelievable. You know, all the things you've jumped through. You know, and then that brings us to, obviously you start playing with Joe, but then you finally do your first solo record. And I mean, when Joe called me and asked me to even just be a part of it, I was like, man, I was so excited. And I know you didn't know, you know, who I even was probably coming in there, even though we'd met once or twice around Joe. But man, it was such a thrill for me to be in that room and to see you, you know, working on your first thing with your name on it. I'm super proud of that record, man, and I think you should be. It's so good.
I had a great time making that, Josh. And let me just tell you that Joe had never produced a record before that.
Yeah.
And you were absolutely MVP coming in and doing the work that you did.
Thank you.
On that. But from the first day when we got Tommy and Chris in the studio, and of course Kenny Wayne Shepherd was there too, playing incredible guitar stuff, and I forgot to mention playing. We did a couple of Kenny Wayne Shepherd records
Yeah.
with Double Trouble back in the late '90s,
Well, there was a
and so
period there where,
and
you
this
know, where you were doing all the Buddy Guys and, you know, every blues record on Silvertone or all those records. Yeah, I remember getting them and always seeing Reese Wynans.
what is it with the? I'm so lucky with guitar players, man. I don't know what it is, but it's just it's been uh, joyful to work with all these great musicians. Uh, that record was nothing but joy from the beginning to the end.
Yeah.
We actually reprised more of Stevie stuff that I had planned on doing,
Yeah.
but once Tommy and Chris and Kenny Wayne got up there, couldn't help it.
Yeah.
You know, I was only going to do two Stevie songs. We ended up doing four, and then the other songs kind of sent out to guitar players and singers, and they all did a terrific job. Warren and um, Sam Moore sang, and of course Kev Moe came in, and it was great having the fantastic singers there, Jimmy Hall and Mike Ferris, and of course I forgot about Doyle, who
Doyle, Bonnie Bramlett. I mean, Vince
Bonnie
even sang on that tune. Yeah, so much. Everybody loves you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that was really a labor of love, and I felt really great about it. Uh, uh, um, I listen to it occasionally. It's been what, about 4 years now, so
Yeah.
3 years or something, and you think about maybe we'll do another one of these days,
I
but
hope
we'll
we
see what
do.
happens.
I
We'll
hope
see
we
what
do.
happens. Right now, in the middle of the pandemic, you know, I'm happy to be doing anything at all. I
hear
think
you.
my next session coming up is with a homeless guy, a friend of our sax player, who and I don't even know his name. Paulie says, "Yes, it's a homeless guy. I wrote songs with him. So you want to do a cover? You want to play keyboards on it?" I said, "Well, I don't. I guess so. You send him over here. I'm not. It's not like I'm doing anything else, which I'm
Exactly.
doing nothing."
Oh man, Reese. Well, I mean, it's unbelievable, all the things you've done, and like I said, I'm honored to be your friend and to even be, you know, around you. Sometimes it freaks me out. But let's jump into my 10 questions. I've curated a little bit differently because there are no guitar questions in here, as they
All right,
normally are.
all right. I'm ready. Go ahead. Hit it.
All right, number one, when you were first playing piano, learning, do you remember the first little piece of music, lick, hook that when you got it under your fingers, it lit the fire? Like, I can't believe I just figured this out and it sounds like music. You know, do you remember that moment?
From when I first started playing, the thing that lit the fire for me was well after I'd started playing, and it was sitting down reading the music for Moonlight Sonata for the first time,
Yeah.
and just playing that. It was that beautiful song. As far as when I first started playing, when they first started teaching kids play piano, you know, you learn stupid little nursery rhymes, and
Yeah.
no, I don't remember any of those things
Moonlight
from when I
Sonata
was.
was the one that when it came out and it sounded correct, it was like, you know, I can
Oh,
imagine
yeah,
that feeling.
I played it during that afternoon. That night I was in bed. I got up out. I can remember getting up out of bed, going downstairs to the piano, turning the light on, and just playing it again
Wow.
because I couldn't believe it.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, I can relate to that, of course. I remember the first time I figured out, you know, BB King's intro to a slow blues, which was one of the first things I ever figured out, you know, and playing along to a record. Like, I would just want to play that over and over and over and over again. Yeah, just magical stuff.
Oh yeah.
Oh, man. Do you remember ever? Okay, so then once you started listening to other music, you know, after the Jerry Lee concert explosion and you know, listening to other music, do you remember the first rock and roll or blues type thing that you learned on piano?
Huh. I guess I do not.
Could have been anything, you know. Could have maybe Chuck Berry. Who knows? You were so were you? Did you listen to Johnny Johnson a lot?
Yeah, those Chuck Berry records were fantastic, and
Amazing,
everybody
incredible.
talked about, and nobody talked about the great piano playing on them. Everybody talked about how great Chuck was, but to me, the way the piano was on there set all those songs up, man.
Oh,
It was
absolutely.
just anyway. So yeah, it was a huge influence on me.
Yeah.
It was great to meet him. I did a record with him.
Yeah. I remember that record, and it was so deserving of that record at the time when it came out, and he finally started to get some of that shine that he greatly deserved.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. All
very
right.
nice man.
Was he? That's awesome. All right. Number 3. What's the first thing you play when you sit down at a piano without thinking? Do your hands just go somewhere automatically?
I don't play anything in particular at first. I see where my fingers go. It doesn't matter what key it is, and I will sit down and just start to improvise, and just wherever they go. Uh, 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 Sometimes I have something in mind, but for the most part, it's a total stream of consciousness.
Yeah. Wow. That's cool because it's like it's probably different and probably different between piano and organ, right? Too, where what happens and when you sit down.
Yeah, it's like that on piano. Organ is not like that. If
Hmm.
I sit down to the organ, I'm going to play something like "Whiter Shade of Pale," or I'll play something like um, uh, "Green Onions," or I'll play uh, some Deep Purple thing,
Yeah.
or who I like now is the guy who played with Pink Floyd, Richard Wright.
Oh yeah.
His organ stuff is really interesting to me. I never really paid that much attention to him back in the day. I thought it was just kind of floaty, but the more I listened to it, the more I realized how important all those things that he did were.
Yeah.
And so I've listened to him a little bit.
It's amazing how the instrument changes things. Like for me, like say I get to the studio or to a gig and I flip standby on my amp, part of the first thing that comes out, yeah, it's just whatever, but it's also like, you're checking to make sure everything's working and the balance is good and your fret, your intonation's good. So the organ is probably more like that because you got to turn it on and get your sound together and check that way as
Right.
opposed to the piano, you just sit down and whatever comes out.
Well, I think for me, the piano is more of a complete thing. The organ is kind of like a right-handed thing. I mean, I know for me anyway. I mean, a lot of organ players sit down and it's complete with themselves. They get the pedals, they get the left hand, they get the right hand. They're all set with the organ.
Yeah.
I don't play organ in a traditional style like that. So
Right.
it's sort of a right hand centric sort of thing.
Gotcha. Gotcha. All right, number 4. What do you hear like in your head? What key, groove, style? What's the most prevalent thing that pops into your head when you're just sitting around, cooking eggs or whatever? I've constantly got a shuffle going in my head. It just never goes away. So much so like when I lay down to go to bed, I need to finish it. I'm always improving. It never goes away. Do you have anything like that that's just always jumping in there?
Oh, we're all working on our songs at any given songs that we're writing at any given time, and influenced by any soundtracks we're hearing from any TV shows and movies. Last thing we heard on the radio, somebody suggested listening to this particular radio station. You hear some cool groove that you haven't heard in a while, and so for me, it's kind of like the last thing I heard,
Yeah.
and I sometimes I actually see it written out on a staff, and I just fill in the melody of my made up melody to it around on the right hand, and just see where we go. Sometimes it's just you hear a thing. For me, it's sometimes like I see it as well as hear it.
Interesting. See, that's something I've never. I can read okay, but it's something I never look at when I listen to music. I don't ever see it visually like that. That's interesting to me. Yeah, that's all those classical piano lessons.
I don't know. I don't know. I thought everybody did that.
All right. Number 5. When do you feel like, as an improviser, you started to find your voice? Do you remember moments of, blowing and coming upon something that was like, this sounds more like me. I'm going to follow this left turn and go further that way? Because you have a really unique voice as an improviser, both on piano and on organ. Do you remember, like, consciously moments of, hey, this sounds like me?
Well, you think about 50 years, a career that's 50 years long. And of course, there's so many moments. Remembering the first moments from back when you started. For me, when I first started, I was in cover bands. And so the moments were few and far between. And I would, even you go up through the years, the Second Coming, which was a band that stretched things out a little bit. I wasn't a good player then. I have to admit, I was not the world's best at anything back then. When I went out to California, started working with Boz and playing with that band, I felt like I had something to say with that music. And so that was the first time for me. I felt like I was really adding something and saying something unique. So that's one of the songs we played was "Sweet Release." Another one was "Loan Me a Dime." Another one was there were several other songs from back then, and I can recall playing them and saying there's something special about me playing these songs. It just feels like you've matured as a musician.
Wow. Yeah. It is, I mean, because you're somebody who, when I hear you, not just backing up somebody, but when I hear you blowing, taking a solo, I know immediately that's Reese. Like, I've heard so much of it in my life. I know your improvisational style. So you've arrived certainly at a personal voice on it.
I feel like I have a voice too, and it's kind of developed. I wasn't looking for it. It just kind of all of a sudden there it is.
Yeah. All right. Number 6. What do you consider your biggest weakness as a keyboard player?
Oh, my biggest weakness is probably playing too much, not leaving enough holes in the music for other things to happen. I have a lot of weaknesses. I don't play ballads particularly well. I don't like playing in the key of B very much. And so I have a lot of weaknesses.
Wow. Well, yeah, we all are harder on ourselves than than anybody else would ever be. Because I don't see it that way. All right. Number 7. If you were flying into a date, a fly gig, and something gets messed up with the back line, and you can only have either organ or piano, do you automatically have a split-second decision of, it's got to be one or the other, or is it dependent on the gig?
No, it depends on the gig, on who the artist is. That happened with a Gary Nicholson gig, and I only had piano, and it didn't work out well at all. I said, no, for this gig, I needed the organ, but the organ would not get tuned up to pitch because we had a bad generator, and sometimes the organ and portable generators don't go very well together.
Yeah, man. So it's 100% dependent on gigs. So, like, if you flew in somewhere with Stevie back in the day overseas, would you have been the other way? You would have wanted the organ first and foremost on that gig.
Absolutely, and for the most part, it's the organ. If I have organ and piano, most gigs, it's more organ than piano.
Gotcha.
With a rock and roll band, I would like the Prowlers. The piano was perfect for that, and so I don't work with that many rock and roll bands, so not anymore.
All right. All right. I figured that would be the answer. All right. Number 8. Was Stevie really that loud? Like, was it? You're on the other side of the stage, but was it really from my the outsider's point of view? Was it as loud as I know it probably was?
At the time, it seemed like the loudest thing I'd ever heard. I have to tell you the truth, though. I'll tell you something. After working with people like Joe Bonamassa and Jimmy Barnes and Kenny Wayne Shepherd, no, it wasn't that loud. It was fine.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I wonder if you have like your ears have been tuned to eliminate guitar frequencies in a way that allows you to just handle loud ass guitar because you've been around it so much. It's crazy.
I've been lucky with my ears. I have a very minor dip in the low mids on my left side, which after 50 years, I figure that's acceptable.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, you talked about playing in B earlier, but just in general, are you happy not to have to play in E flat as much anymore?
I love E flat.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you something, I play different licks when I'm playing in different keys. And the stuff that I used to play in E flat, I don't get to play that anymore. So it's like an old friend that I miss.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, you played so many flat keys all the time like that. It probably made you a better musician, I would think.
Oh, it did make me a musician. And Stevie loved tuning the guitar down. And I only cheated once. I cheated on, I have to admit to cheating on a song called, what was that song? Don't come a rockin'. When the first, the house is rocking. I cheated on that song.
You played that
So
tune in C?
that song was in B.
Yeah.
And I recorded it on a digital piano and modulated it to C.
Well, they're playing it in C. I mean, to them.
Well, I know they are, but I didn't modulate anything else. Just that one song.
That's amazing. I didn't know that. That's great and piece of information right there.
Oh well, that also led to several unusual moments because that was the first song of our set. I think it would go right into another song right after that, which a lot of times did not leave me really time to unmodulate the piano. So I would find myself playing the organ in one key and the piano in a different key. And so that was the mind bender tricks going on there. Sometimes you have to do it. And so that was a challenge too.
I've been there before with I've been there with a keyboard player who did rely on transpose much more than he should have, and who had many of those moments on stage. Yeah, crazy. All right, number 9. What keeps you at this point, after all you've done, motivated not just to keep doing it, but to continue to try to better yourself as a musician, and to listen to new things and keep growing? Because that's something that interests me as I get older. How am I keeping myself pushing forward and growing? What does it for you?
Well, motivation is an interesting thing to talk about. I'm actually having a little issue with motivation during the pandemic here, with thousands of us musicians with very limited prospects and long-term unemployment. It's tough for us right now, and it's hard to stay motivated. Yeah. So what's the thing that's getting me going right now is writing songs, writing music, trying to, and so I'm basically entertaining myself, and I'm trying to come up with unique ideas. Yeah. And so I feel like if I could do that, then I could try to outlast this pandemic, and at the same time, I'll have some interesting uh, uh, music to play, and trying to improve as a writer is the main motivation right now.
Wow. Well, that's inspiring to me from afar because you've had this whole career as a player, doing everything you could possibly do in the business, and now you're spending time, writing songs. So hopefully that means the new record is soon, and we'll be ready.
I hope so too, Josh. I hope so too.
Dude, Reese, thank you for doing this, man. This is like a pleasure to speak to you. I'm so grateful you took the time out of your day.
Man, it's just a pleasure talking to you, Josh. I look forward to seeing you in person one of these days again, and maybe we'll get together in a couple of months for Joe's next project. We'll see what happens. Take care of yourself, man.
Thank you, Reese. Thank you, man. A pleasure as always. All right, bye, Reese.
Bye.